the snow on the road to the castle had not been broken in a year. The villagers said the road had no end. They said the road went up into the Black Peaks and then it stopped, and what was at the top of it was not a place a living person should walk toward. But that night, a single set of footprints went up the road. They were uneven. One foot pressed deep. The other dragged a long, thin line behind it, like the mark a wounded animal leaves when it goes to die. At the top of the road stood a gate of black iron, and kneeling in front of it with her basket in her arms and snow on her hood was a woman of 26, breath shaking, knuckles raised to strike the metal. Her name was Marisha. She had a bad leg and a small wooden box, and a reason to be there that nobody in the valley would have understood. And what happened when that gate opened was something her family would whisper about for 200 years. Stay with me on this one. The road from Vitresna to the high castle was 8 miles uphill. In summer, it took a strong man 4 hours. In winter, in deep snow, with a leg that would not bend right, it had taken Marisha since just after dawn. The sun was long down. She had stopped twice to be sick from pain. She had not stopped a third time because she knew if she sat, she would not get up. This was 1620. The Carpathian winter had started in October and had not yet decided to end. In the valley below, the village of Vitrasna had bolted its doors at dusk, the way it had every night since the rumor began 2 weeks ago. The rumor was that the lord of the high castle had taken sick. People had laughed at first. They had said you could not make a thing like him sick. Then someone had pointed out quietly that a man like him would not get sick himself. Only his people would. And when his people got sick, what he did about it was the part that should worry the village. Marisha had heard about it from her father. Her father was the village healer. 61 years old, his hands had pulled half the children in Vitrasna into the world. He was getting old now. His eyes were starting to fail him. His memory for the names of plants would slip sometimes mid-sentence. So Marisha had been doing more and more of the work. The villagers tolerated it because there was no one else. But they did not like her. They did not let her touch them if there was any other choice. The reason was simple. Marisha had been born wrong. The midwife had said so the night her mother died, bringing her into the world. One leg had come out shorter than the other, bent at the hip in a way it should not bend. Her left shoulder sat half an inch higher than her right. Her face was not ugly, but it was not the kind of face a man in Vitrasna wanted to look at twice. She had grown up watching their mothers cross the road to avoid her, being told in 100 small ways every day that she was a thing the village kept around because it needed her hands but did not have to like the rest of her. She was used to it. That night, 2 weeks into the rumor, her father had sat by their fire and said the thing she had been waiting for him to say. They sent for me from the castle. She had not looked up from the herbs she was sorting. I'm not going, he had said. I can't. I'd be dead before I made the gate. The road was too steep, the cold was too deep, and his lungs had been bad since November. He would not survive the climb. They offered gold, he had said. A lot of it. I said no. Good. A long silence. Then he had looked up at her with something in his face she had not seen since her mother died. Marisha, I'm not going to ask you. You hear me? I am not going to ask. I know. There's a man up there dying. 2 weeks. A steward of his. The wound is in the leg, and it has gone bad. They've tried everything. They have nobody. I know. You don't owe him anything. You don't owe any of them anything. If you stay home, your father will not say one word against it. She had set down the herbs. She had wiped her hands on her apron. She had crossed the room to the small chest by her bed and begun to pack. She packed dried yarrow for the bleeding, crushed garlic and honey for the rot, willow bark for the pain, pine resin for the dressing, a small pot of bear fat to bind the poultice. She packed clean linen torn from her own bedding, because she had nothing else. She packed her small wooden box with the steel needles and the silk thread, and the little hooked knife her mother had used to cut away dead flesh. She packed bread. She did not pack a weapon. There was no weapon she owned that would help her where she was going. At the door, her father had risen from his chair, and they had looked at each other across the small, dim room. Why, he had said, because no one else will. She had pulled her hood up and stepped out into the snow. That had been at dawn. Now it was nearly midnight, and she was kneeling at the gate. She lifted her hand and struck the iron 3 times. The sound rang up the great walls and died. For a long moment, nothing. Then behind the gate, the heavy clank of a bar being lifted. The hinges began to move without anyone touching them. The 2 leaves of black iron swung inward, slow and silent, and a long, cold corridor of stone opened in front of her. A man stood at the end of it with a torch. Old, maybe older than her father. Gray hair pulled back, a long black coat, the kind of face you see on men who have served hard masters for a long time and have stopped flinching. His eyes in the torchlight were 2 black wells of fear. He looked at her, at the basket in her arms, at the way she had to lean against the gatepost to get her bad leg under her again. You are alone. Yes. Your father is not coming. He cannot come. The old servant closed his eyes for one breath. Then he stepped aside. Then come in, child. Quickly, before the Lord sees you in the cold. The gate closed behind her without a sound. The corridor inside was longer than any room she had ever stood in. The flagstones were so cold she could feel them through the soles of her boots. The servant walked ahead. She limped behind, and her foot dragging on the stone made a long, thin scraping sound that traveled up the walls. He did not slow down, but he did not walk fast either. He walked at the pace she could keep. She understood dimly that this was a kindness. At the end of the corridor was a door. He opened it. They went up a flight of stairs, the servant ahead with the torch, Marisha behind, hauling herself up step by step on the iron rail. At the top was another door. He opened that one too. And she was in the great hall. The villagers spoke of the great hall as a place that was not really a room at all, but a kind of cave, hollowed inside the mountain by the thing that lived there. They were not entirely wrong. The ceiling went up so far the torchlight could not find it. The walls were hung with banners that had not been new in 200 years. A long table ran down the middle. A fire burned in a hearth at the far end, and the fire was the only thing in that whole vast space that looked like it belonged to a living world. And in front of the fire, in a high chair, sat the lord of the castle. He did not move when she came in. He did not turn his head. He sat with his elbows on the arms of the chair, and his fingers laced under his chin, and his eyes on the fire. He was beautiful. That was a strange thought, because she had been told her whole life that the man in this chair was not really a man. She had been told he had no face you could look at, that he had claws and yellow eyes and a tongue like a snake, that he was death wearing a coat. She had not been told he was beautiful. He looked like he might be 30. Black hair to his shoulders. A face cut as cleanly as a coin. Skin so pale you could see the blue of his veins at his temple. He wore a coat the color of old wine. There was a thin gold chain at his throat. His hands, folded in front of him, were long and white and still. The old servant cleared his throat. My lord. The healer. The Lord did not turn. You said the healer would be a man. I said the healer is the village healer, my lord. The village healer could not come. He sent his daughter. His daughter. Yes, my lord. A pause. Then the Lord turned his head slowly and looked at Marisha for the first time. She felt every inch of his look. It went from her face down to her boots and back. It saw the bent leg, the high shoulder, the wet hem of her dress, the snow in her hair, the basket clutched against her chest. It did not show her pity. It did not show her contempt. It just saw her. It was the first time in her life anyone had looked at her without showing one of those two things. He said, "How old are you?" 26. And you walked here? From the village? Tonight? Yes. You are a fool. She did not answer that. There was nothing to answer. My steward is dying, he said. 14 days now. 5 healers from 3 valleys have looked at him. 2 ran. 2 said it could not be saved. 1 tried and made it worse. And tonight you came up the mountain by yourself, in the dark, on a leg that does not work because no one else would. He looked at her for a long moment. Take her to him, he said to the servant. Give her whatever she asks for. If she fails, do not bring her back here. Send her down the mountain in the cart. Do you understand me? Yes, my lord. Go. The old servant turned. Marisha turned with him. They went out a side door of the great hall and down another corridor and up another flight of stairs, and behind her, in the chair by the fire, the Lord did not move. She did not look back at him. The room they brought her to was small. There was 1 window with the shutters closed. There was a fire in the grate. There was a narrow bed against the wall, and on the bed was the dying man. She set down her basket and went to him. He was thin. He looked as if he had been thin for years and was now becoming something less than thin. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow and wet. The bedclothes had been pulled back from his right leg, and the leg was wrong. From the knee down, the skin was the color of old plums. It was wet in places. The smell was the smell she had been trained since she was 9 to recognize and never to fear. Rot. Deep rot. Rot that had passed through the skin and into the meat and was now reaching for the bone. She knelt at the side of the bed. She put her hand on the old man's forehead. He was burning. She closed her eyes for 1 breath. She let herself feel the size of the work in front of her. Then she opened her eyes and got to it. His name, she said. Andre, said the servant who had brought her in. Andre, can you hear me? The eyelids fluttered. My name is Marisha. I am here to clean your leg. It will hurt. I am sorry. Squeeze my hand if you understand. The thin fingers of his left hand twitched against the blanket. She found his hand and put her own into it. The pressure that came back was small, but it was there. Good. Good man. Now, you are going to live. Do you hear me? You are going to live. His eyes opened. He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. Then he closed them again, and he did not let go of her hand. She got to work. She asked the servant for boiling water, for clean cloth, for a sharp knife with a narrow blade, and a candle to hold the blade in the flame, for vinegar, for honey, the dark kind from old combs, for any strong wine he could find. He brought her a bottle older than her father. She washed her hands 3 times. She let her hands cool in the snow on the windowsill before she touched him again, because his fever was so high that the heat of her own fingers might have hurt him. Then she began. She cut away the dead skin first, slowly in small pieces. She held the candle near and watched the color of the flesh under each cut and stopped before she went into anything that might still bleed. The wound went deeper than she had thought. Under the dead skin was a hollow the size of a hen's egg. The muscle inside had gone soft. She cleaned it out with vinegar and clean cloth. Andre did not scream. He made one small sound. His hand, which had not let go of hers, tightened and then went limp. He had passed out. That was a mercy. She kept working. She mixed her poultice on the floor beside her. Yarrow garlic resin, bear fat, honey poured over the top. She had been making this poultice since she was 11. She could have made it in the dark. She packed the wound full of it and wrapped the leg in clean linen torn from her own bedding. Then she sat back on her heels and looked at what she had done. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. The rot had gone too deep. He was too far gone. A poultice would slow it, but it would not stop it. Not at this stage. Not for a man this thin. She thought. Behind her, she heard the door open. She did not turn. "Lord," said the old servant. She did not turn. She heard him come in. She heard him stop 2 paces behind her. She felt him there. The way you feel a storm in the air before it breaks. She kept her eyes on Andre. "I need to take the leg," she said. A long silence. "What?" said the old servant. "Below the knee. The rot has gone too deep. If I leave the leg, he dies. If I take it tonight, he might live. You cannot take a man's leg." "I can. My father taught me. I have done it twice. Twice. Both lived." She heard the Lord move. He came around the side of the bed and stood looking down at Andre. His face did not change. He looked at the wrapped leg. He looked at the gray skin above the dressing. He looked at Andre's face. "Do it," he said. The servant began to protest. The Lord lifted one hand, and the servant stopped. "Do it," the Lord said again. He was looking at Marisha. "Tell me what you need." "More cloth. More wine. The longest knife with the truest edge in this castle. A saw with fine teeth. A fire I can heat iron in. 2 strong men to hold him if he wakes. And honey. As much honey as you have." The Lord looked at the servant. The servant left at a run. Marisha looked at the Lord. She had not meant to. But she did. And the Lord was already looking at her. "You have done this twice," he said. "And both lived." "Yes." "Tell me their names." "Stephen, Taylor's son. Caught his leg in a wagon wheel 6 years ago. He's still alive. Walks with a stick. And old man Petru. Frostbite. 3 winters back. He died last spring of something else. Not of the leg." The Lord nodded slowly. "Then do it, healer. And know that if my steward dies tonight, it will not be because you came here." She looked up at him. He was looking down at her. His face had not changed. But she had the strange sense that he had just given her, a crippled village girl on her knees on his floor, something nobody had ever given her before. He had given her his trust. She did not know what to do with it. She nodded once. She turned back to Andre. And she worked. The next 6 hours were the hardest of her life. She took the leg below the knee with the saw. Andre did not wake. The 2 men held the lamp and fed cloth into her hands. She tied off the great vein with the silk thread from her wooden box. She sealed the small ones with the heated knife. She dressed the stump with honey and resin and linen. At the end, she sat back on the floor with her clothes soaked in another man's blood, and her hands shaking so hard she could not hold the bowl when the servant brought her water. She drank it anyway with both hands. Then she made a tea. Willow bark, meadowsweet, a small dried flower her father had taught her was for the heart. She held Andre's head up and dripped it into his mouth drop by drop. He swallowed. He swallowed again. She wiped his face. She covered him. The fire had burned down. The window had begun to lighten at the edges. Outside, somewhere very far away, A bird called the way birds call before the sun. Andre opened his eyes. He looked at her. His eyes were clearer than they had been when she came in. He did not try to speak. But he found her hand again, and he held it, and his breath went in slow and came out slow, and the wet sound that had been in his lungs all night was gone. She put her forehead down on the edge of the bed, and she breathed. Behind her, she heard a chair move. She had not known there was a chair behind her. She turned her head. The Lord was sitting in a high-backed chair against the far wall, in shadow. She had not known he had been there. By the way the candle on the table beside him had burned down to the brass, he had been there a long time. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her, she understood, the entire time. He stood. He came across the room. He stopped at the end of the bed and he looked down at his steward and he said, very softly, "Andre." Andre's eyes moved. "Found him. Held. I am here, old friend," the Lord said. "Sleep. The healer has done it." Andre closed his eyes. The Lord did not move for a long moment. Then he turned his head, and he looked at Marisha and he said, "Come." She got up using the wall. He saw and did not move to help her, and she understood that this too was a kindness. He was not going to be a man who put his hands on her without being asked. She followed him out. Now, before I go on, if you're still with me on this one, if you're feeling what's happening here, hit that subscribe button. Because what comes next, what the Lord sees in the firelight when she stands in front of him, that is the part of this story that nobody in Vitrasna would believe for 100 years. So stay with me. He led her back to the great hall. Dawn was beginning to come in through the high, narrow windows. The hall looked different in the gray light. Less like a cave. More like a room. The fire in the great hearth had been built up while she had worked. The long table had been set with a cup and a loaf, and a cold roast bird and a bowl of winter apples. The Lord stopped at the head of the table. He turned to face her. "Sit," he said. "Eat. You have not eaten in a day." She did not sit. She was standing because if she sat, she was not sure she would stand again. She was standing because her legs were shaking, and her hands were shaking, and her teeth were starting to chatter from the cold of the great hall and the cold of what she had just done. "I need to go home," she said. "My father. He will be worried. Your father knows where you are. Still, I need to go. Eat first. I will not have you walk down the mountain in the snow on no food. The cart will take you. Eat." She sat. She had no choice. Her legs gave out and she sat. She looked at the food. She did not pick any of it up. The Lord crossed to a sideboard. He came back. He set a small leather purse on the table in front of her. It was not large. But when he set it down, it made the deep, heavy sound that only one thing makes. "Gold," he said. 20 pieces. It is what I would have paid your father. It is what I am paying you." She looked at the purse. She looked up at him. "No," she said. He went very still. "No. No. I did not come for gold. What did you come for then?" "I came because no one else would. Because there was a man up here dying. And in our valley there was no one else who could help him, and there was no one else who would. That is why I came. Not for gold." He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. "Take it anyway," he said. "Take it for your father. Take it because winter has another 4 months in it, and the gold will buy your father wood." She thought about her father coughing by the fire. About the price of wood in February. About how stupid it would be to let her father go cold to keep her pride. She took the purse. She put it in the bottom of her basket. "Thank you," she said. "No," he said. "Thank you." She got up. The bad leg was worse now. She had been kneeling on a stone floor for 6 hours, and the leg had locked. She had to grip the edge of the table to get herself upright. She wrapped her cloak around her, picked up her basket, and turned toward the door. Then she turned back, remembering. His dressings need to be changed morning and night. Honey poultice both times. If the smell comes back, send for me. If the fever returns, send for me. If you let him alone and follow what I have said, he will live. The Lord nodded once. She started for the door. Healer, he said. She stopped. She did not turn. Marisha. She turned then. She looked at him. He was standing very still by the great table. The dawn light was on his face. He looked in that moment, less like a beautiful young lord and more like a man who had not slept. There was something in his eyes she could not name. You wear something at your throat, he said. Her hand came up to her throat by itself. She had not meant to do it. Her fingers found the small thing that had hung there since the day she was old enough to wear it. It was a pendant, a small flat oval of silver, no bigger than the nail of her thumb. On the front of it, beaten into the metal, was a shape that was supposed to be a hand and a star and a small curl of leaf. Her father had said it was very old. He had said it had been her mother's and her mother's mother's, and it had come down through a long line of women in her family, and it was always given to the daughter least likely to be wanted. It had been given to her on her 7th birthday. She had worn it every day since. It was my mother's, she said. May I see it? She did not know why. But she walked across the hall to him. She lifted the chain over her head and held the pendant out on her open palm. He did not take it. He looked at it. For a long moment he did not move. He did not breathe. His eyes were on the small piece of silver lying on her open hand, and his whole body had gone so still that she began, for the first time that night, to be afraid. Not of him. Of what he was about to do. Where did you get this? He said. His voice had changed. It was very quiet. I told you. My mother. And your mother. From hers. How far back? My father said 5. 5 mothers. He closed his eyes. He stood there in the dawn light with his eyes closed, and he did not move, and he did not speak, and the only sound in the great hall was the fire in the hearth. Then he opened his eyes. And he did something that nobody in that castle had ever seen him do. He went down on one knee. In the great hall of his own castle, in front of the long table and the burning hearth, Count Mihai Andronscu of the line of Andronscu, who had ruled the High Pass for 600 years and made kings kneel to him, knelt to a crippled village girl with snow still in her hair. She could not move. The old servant, who had come back into the hall with an armload of wood, dropped it. The sound rang up the great walls. The Lord did not turn. The servant fell against the door frame and made a small choked sound and could not look away. The Lord on one knee looked up at Marisha. My lady, he said. She was shaking her head. She did not know why. She just was. Get up. My lord, get up. I'm not. Please. Get up. My lady. Listen to me. She listened. There was a woman, he said. A long time ago. In the year you would call 1487. I was new then. I was not what I am now. I was something starving and lost, and I had wandered down out of the mountains because I did not know where else to go. The village I came to was small, and the people in it would have killed me with stones if they had known what I was. They thought I was a sick traveler. There was a woman there who was the village healer. Her name was Ilina. She took me into her house. She put me in front of her fire. She fed me broth from her own bowl. She kept me alive for 14 nights. He paused. On the 14th night, I told her what I was. I expected her to scream, to drive me out. She did not. She listened until I was finished, and then she said, "You are still a man under all of it." And she did not put me out. He took a breath. I could not stay. The danger to her would have been too great. But before I left, I gave her something. A small piece of silver from the chain at my throat, beaten into a flat oval by the village smith, with the sign of my house cut into it. And I told her, if ever any woman of your blood comes to my gate with this at her throat, the gate will open, and she will be mine to protect until she draws her last breath. His voice was very low. That was 130 years ago. I sent men to look for her line in 1573, after the Great Plague swept the lowlands. They came back and told me her line was extinct. Her son had died of the plague. Her grandson was thought lost. I believed them. I have believed them for 47 years. He looked at the pendant on her open hand. They were wrong. She could not speak. "You are her blood," he said. "Ilina's blood. You came up the mountain on a leg that should not have carried you, in snow that should have killed you, to save the life of a man you had never met, because no one else would. You have her hands. You have her face in places. You have the same way of saying no to gold. And you wear, at your throat, the thing I gave her on the last night she was alive to me." He bowed his head. "My lady of the line of Ilina, forgive me that I did not know you at the gate." She found her voice. "Just barely. Get up. Please. Get up." He rose. Slowly. He looked at her, and there was something in his face she did not have a name for, but she would think about it for the rest of her life. It was not love, not in that moment. It was older than love. It was the kind of look a man gives to something he had thought was lost forever, and has just found again at the edge of his own hearth. "You will not go down the mountain tonight," he said. "You will not go down at all. You will send for your father, and your father will come up to live in my castle in good rooms, with a fire that does not go out, and he will be looked after until his last day. And you, my lady, you will be the healer of this house. You will have the high room above the south wall. Whatever gold you ask for, whatever books, whatever herbs in whatever quantity. You will go where you wish in this castle. You will leave when you wish. And no man and no thing in this house, or in this valley, or in these mountains, will ever raise a hand or a voice to you again. Not while I draw breath." She was crying. She had not known she was crying until she felt the wet on her face. She tried to speak and she could not. So she just stood there with the pendant in her open hand, in the great hall of a castle she had been told all her life was the home of a monster, in front of a man who had just gone down on one knee for her. "My lady," he said very gently, "will you stay?" She managed it. Just one word. "Yes." He took her free hand. He bent over it. He pressed his forehead for one long breath to the back of her hand. Then he straightened. He let go. "Then welcome home," he said. "You have been a long time getting here." She lived in the high castle for 56 years. Her father was brought up the mountain in a covered cart 3 days later. The Lord himself rode down to fetch him. The old man wept when he was carried into his rooms. He lived another 9 years and died in his bed, in front of a fire that had not gone out in all that time, with his daughter holding his hand. Andrei the steward lived another 21 years. He learned to walk on a wooden leg the Lord had a craftsman in Vienna make for him. He never again let any healer but Marisha touch him. She became, in time, what her father had been and more. Word went down the mountain. People in Vitrasna who had crossed the road to avoid her came up to the castle gate hat in hand, and she did not turn them away. She did not require gold from the poor. She walked with a silver-headed cane the Lord had made for her bad leg. In her later years, when the leg would not carry her at all, she was carried in a chair by two strong men of the household, and she went to her patients in the chair and worked from it, and her hands did not slow down. She became the most respected healer in 3 Carpathian valleys. People rode for 2 weeks to see her. She trained 6 apprentices. 2 of them were girls from poor villages who had been told they were too plain to be wanted. She told them they would be wanted in her house. Both outlived her. Both carried her work down into the next century. She and the Lord. They were not lovers in the way the songs would tell it. They were something else. He was the first person who had ever sat across a table from her and listened to her speak as if her voice mattered as much as his own. She did not become like him. She would not. She refused twice, when he asked her in her 30th and again in her 55th year. She said her life was a mortal life, and she had been given more of it and better of it than she had ever expected. She said when it was time, she wanted to go. He did not ask a third time. She died in her 82nd year, in the high room above the south wall, in spring, with her window open to the smell of the snowmelt off the peaks. He was with her. So were her 2 apprentices. So was Andre's grandson. She closed her eyes and she opened them once more, and she looked at the Lord who had knelt to her in the great hall 56 years before, and she smiled at him, and she was gone. He buried her on the castle grounds, on the south side, where the sun came first in the morning. He had a stone cut for her. It said her name and the years, and beneath that, in letters very small, just 3 words. The healer who came. He still tends the grave.